Good evening. Welcome to the City of Lebanon Plan Commission meeting. Today is Tuesday, January the 21st, and we'll call the meeting to order. First, we'll take roll call.
Matt Reynolds.
Here.
John Lashley. Absent. Kevin Krulik.
Here.
Keith Campbell.
Here.
Brian Tandy.
Here.
Ashley Paddock. Here. Lori Gross. Here.
Okay, it is a new year. We'll have an election of officers. I believe it's a president, a chairman, a vice chairman, and a secretary. Okay. I would entertain a motion for president or chairman.
I'll nominate Keith Campbell for the chairman position.
Second that. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Carries. Congratulations, Keith. Vice chairman, entertain a nomination.
I'll nominate Brian Tandy for the vice chairman position.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Same sign. Okay, that carries. Secretary, please.
B.
I nominate Kelly Cook.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Same sign. Okay, at this point, Keith will take over.
All right, thank you. Next thing is approval of minutes from last month's meeting in December. We need a motion.
I make a motion we approve the minutes as written.
Okay,
I'll second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay. Old business, Ben, we don't have any old business. Okay. New business indicates we got a public hearing, docket 2004, Hinkey Development LLC requesting a PUD planned unit development rezone and ordinance for a proposed mixed-use development called Waterford. The 7 parcels included in the PUD application are located at the following estimated addresses. Ben, do I need to read them, or are you going to read them all?
I don't know that we need to read them. And they were in the notice, so
Right,
I don't know
okay.
we need to read all the addresses necessarily.
So, Ben, sure, take it away.
All right, good evening, Plan Commission members. We have a lot to go through. What I'll do is I'll kind of give you the overall technical detail that you'll see here. I'll turn it over to the applicant to kind of walk through the story and the overall development concept, some of the details there. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to stop me. There's a lot to go through here. This is a big development. And just to kind of let you know, this has got 2 pieces here. The first one tonight is the PUD rezone and ordinance, and only about half of the development that's being proposed is within the existing city limits of Lebanon. So the PUD rezone and ordinance right now is only on the part of this development that's within the city's jurisdiction. The second item tonight is related to the annexation of the rest of the development. Do you know if we have made any progress with the one final property owner? Okay. Do we have some signs? Okay, so we're still working through some of the consents on annexation. We actually found that part of the old railroad right-of-way was owned by a separate trail entity that was unknown to either the applicant or to the planning staff until we got into it. They have made contact, and I understand that it seems like the consent is the ink is drying, so we were able to get that in time for the meeting tonight. But yeah, so we do have all the consents in place. We'll be hearing the PUD ordinance and rezone for the portion of the project that's within city limits right now. Once the annexation is effective on the remaining portion, they'll come back in and amend their PUD ordinance to include the rest of the property. So we've got about 900 or so acres that are part of this development that are currently within the city limits, and about another 1,100 that are outside that'll be brought in. So we've got a little over 2,000 acres. It's part of the overall development. So significant size project. As you'll see as we start getting into some of the details, we're at a very conceptual level as part of this PUD rezone. Certainly when you look to develop a 2,000 acre piece, you don't know where all the roads are going to go and how all the lots are going to lay out just yet. That happens as you get more into the preliminary planning phase, which will come in phases on this project. So right now we're looking at overall use districts and standards associated with each one of those use districts related to both use and development standards. And then as the project comes in phases, which I'm sure there's going to be a number of phases with a project this size over the next 15 or so years, each one of those phases will come in with more detail with the preliminary plan. So we're looking at the overall concept tonight. for that, and I'll start walking through some of the details if they can pull the screen up. Since staff's computer didn't work, I had to borrow the computer from the applicant, so at least we got a screen that's working. So I'll walk through some of the details here. This is actually the overall 2,000-acre development. If you look here at this next slide, this shows the pieces of the development that are actually within city limits right now. So you can kind of see the difference. I'll focus on the specifics of the part that's in the city, but I want you to see the overall concept. So at the north end, it kind of runs to about the north end of the main part of the project is 100 south. And at the south end, you're at 300 south. So this is about 2 miles long. This is a big project. And we're basically between Interstate 65 and 400 east. So the contiguous part that you see, the main part of that is probably about 1,800 or so acres. And then there's a separate piece that's up just east of the county fairgrounds that you see in the upper left-hand corner of this screen. That's also part of the overall development that's a little bit segmented from the rest of the development, not contiguous, but it is part of the overall development. And I'll let the applicant go into some of the details related to the concept and how that piece develops as it relates to the overall project. To talk a little bit through some of the details of the overall design, you can see here there are 4 different use districts represented on this overall design. In the purple, you've got what is called the village center. And I'll let them walk through kind of the overall design concept here, but it's generally commercial retail uses, more neighborhood-oriented type uses, smaller scale buildings, although there could be some multifamily in that area or surrounding that area. A little bit more neighborhood-oriented retail type village center development. And the applicant's got some they got some images that show you conceptually how this might develop and what it might look like here in a second based on the standards that we've got put in place. So that's the main component, kind of the center of the overall development is in that purple area that's along and on both sides of 400 East that you see there. The green area is the primary residential district. This is the lifestyle community district. And I'll let the applicant walk through some of the details there. There is intentions and plans for a golf course as part of this development. So this will be a very golf course oriented development primarily. They're going to plan for and accommodate golf carts in their village center. There are going to be, golf cart lanes and paths, et cetera, to get people in and around the development so they don't have to use their automobile all the time. Certainly there's also pedestrian accommodations here as well. But there will be a variety of different residential type developments that may happen in here. Again, you're looking at several hundred acres, so this is not just one product type. This is several product types. It could be anything from condos and townhomes to patio homes to a more traditional single-family home all the way up to kind of an upper-level single-family home. I think they're really looking for a village concept all the way throughout, and I'll let them talk a little bit about that more. But in terms of the uses that are permitted within the green residential district, it could be any number of single-family, both attached and detached products, depending on how the overall site develops over time. The next piece in blue is the industrial district. This generally follows our planned business industrial standards. So your typical enclosed industrial buildings, no outside storage is permitted, high quality architecture. You're really looking at distribution warehouse type uses, and then also into light manufacturing, research and development, and things like that. As you know, the city has really been focusing their economic development strategy over the last few years on higher wage jobs. So again, we're looking for quality employers for this area, as I'm sure the applicant is too. They want employees working there that can afford to rent apartments and buy homes in the area. So they're really looking for quality employers. We've got some standards that ensure that the buildings are going to be high quality as well. I'll go through those all in a little bit in a second. But generally, from the use perspective, that'll follow our planned business industrial district.
Hey, Ben, can you step into the mic a little bit?
Sorry. So that'll generally follow our planned business industrial use standards. Will be an industrial district. The yellow or light orange, I guess, depending on your interpretation there, that is a more, what I would say, traditional auto-oriented commercial and retail district. You could see any number of different types of uses, from outlets for fast food or restaurants, up to and including larger big box type retail users like Meijer and other things like that. So yeah, that would be your more traditional auto-oriented commercial retail. But again, the standards for architecture and design are very high in all of these districts. So walking through a little bit how we approach this, both to allow some flexibility in how this gets designed overall and what the market's dictating in terms of the types of houses that people are wanting, but then also ensuring that we get high-quality development. And I've outlined a lot of this in your staff report that you guys see here. So in terms of, we'll start with the lifestyle community district, the residential district. We have a number of different product types that we try to design for, or to accommodate with our development standards. And we've got them divided up into a couple of different single-family categories. So you have single-family detached, your traditional single-family home, with a front-load garage, but we're calling it village standard. And what that means by that is we want the house to be closer to the street, but then the garage to be less prominent. So the house will have, say, in this case, for example, a 10-foot setback, but then the garage will have a 20-foot setback, so we'll ensure that the garages are set back at least 10 feet from the front of the house, so the house is more prominent than the garage, but still allowing for a front-load garage type. So that's one of the standards, and we wrote standards for square footage and density and setbacks associated with that type of village-style house. So a little bit smaller lot, a little bit tighter setbacks to accommodate that village-type development. But again, the architectural standards I get to in a moment here are still very high for that. So that kind of accommodates a little bit more of a unique product type you don't see too often, and unless you're doing an overall development of this scale. The second one is a more traditional single-family detached front-load garage, but with more of a garage forward design. I call this a more typical, what you typically see in a suburban subdivision where the garage is more prominent, just kind of a traditional single-family home. This we have right now is proposed to have a standard that's where the lots are a little bit larger than the village-style homes, just to make sure that we've got a little bit of separation from the homes. And I will say that, you know, we're working with the applicant still. You know, again, I mentioned that property to the northwest that's separated. Maybe we can accommodate some different things. I know the applicant will talk about some product types that he's proposing that are very high-priced product, but have a garage forward design on a smaller lot. So we're still trying to figure out exactly how these standards lay out exactly, and we'll talk when they get into it. We may ask the opinion of the Plan Commission how we accommodate that in the ordinance to make sure we're still getting the high quality standard we're looking for. So we're still working through that, but we do have some standards associated with that typical garage forward design with a little bit larger lot side and a little bit larger side setbacks. The third product type would then be a single-family detached, but with a rear-load garage. So it'd be an alley-load product, no garage facing the front. It'd be all house with the garage to the rear, serviced by the alley. So again, a little bit smaller lot size to make it a little bit more of a village downtown type design house that you might see in our typical downtown, with the garage to the back. And then, in addition to that, we have a couple of attached products that will, you know, duplexes and triplexes and or townhomes and condos. And again, wrote standards specific to each one of those uses as well. So again, we're trying again to create some flexibility in how this overall project develops over the next 15 to 20 years, but still making sure we have appropriate standards attached to each product type we might see out here as it relates to those items. In terms of the architectural standards, we have fairly high architectural standards in the Unified Development Ordinance. They address everything from materials to window treatments to other architectural elements that are required. That addresses how a house on a corner lot, what you do on the side of the house facing the street. So we have some very high standards in our UDO. And I will say, other than a couple of minor revisions, just to allow a little bit of flexibility, the applicant has agreed to meet all of those standards. And so you're going to see very, very high-quality architectural design in this neighborhood associated with those standards. I don't know that we have a neighborhood in Lebanon right now that meets all of our architecture requirements. So this is something we're really going to be able to ensure that we're getting high-quality design and standard in this neighborhood. As we all know, we can't legislate housing price, but we can make sure the standard is appropriate. So making sure it's if they use vinyl siding, it's of a greater thickness. If they have to have a certain percentage of masonry on the fronts. The windows all have to have certain more substantial treatments. So those are all in there. We said the couple of changes is, certainly right now our UDO allows aluminum siding. We have prohibited that in this neighborhood. I don't think they had any intention of using aluminum siding anyway, but we just wanted to make that clear in the ordinance. Aluminum siding is prohibited. We did a little bit of variation on the front of the house. Right now we require 50% masonry. And what we've done is basically here said all homes will have a first floor masonry. If they chose to do a masonry up to the bottom of the first floor windows, basically a wainscot that runs along the front of the house, they could do that, but then they have to have two different siding styles on the house to kind of break up what would be more. So if they chose lap siding, horizontal lap siding for part of the house, maybe a little shaker style siding on part of the front of the house also. So again, just trying to make sure we've got some different visual appeal to the front of the house if there's a little bit less amount of masonry. Again, just trying to make sure we get the overall design and quality that we're looking for. So we did do that to allow a little bit of flexibility. The other thing that we did, and right now, if there's a corner lot, we require the side of the home facing the street to have 30% masonry. So basically, the first 3 feet of the home, of the first floor of the home on that street side would require to have masonry. I don't know many builders that do that anymore unless they're doing a full masonry house. So you'll see some of those in this neighborhood. But what they wanted to do is, again, some flexibility to say if somebody's using 100% fiber cement siding, also sometimes known as hardy plank is kind of the brand name everybody knows. If that home is using 100% hardy plank, then they don't have to meet the masonry requirement. So that any home side of the homes that are facing some sort of public street side or rear, if they're using hardy plank on all sides adjacent to the street, then the masonry requirement they don't have to meet. But that's the only way that they would not have to meet that masonry requirement. So any homes that are using vinyl would still have to meet the masonry requirement on those sides that are visible from the street. One other thing that, again, I don't know that they had any intention of doing it, but we do permit 3-tab shingles, which is kind of an entry-level builder grade type of shingle. So we're not permitting 3-tab shingles. We're requiring 3-dimensional architectural shingles or some other shingle type that you typically see on a higher priced home. So we did eliminate those. And then the only other architectural change right now is that we don't permit detached garages. They have to be attached 2-car garages. So for them, when they've got some of these village-style homes, it'll be detached garages on a rear-load alley. They want to be able to have something that's detached that our UDO doesn't permit now. So we did write in a standard that says for a certain product type, they are allowed to be detached, but they do have to be alley-load, rear-load garages. So there will be no detached front-load garages. In terms of the landscape standards, again, in terms of each residential lot, they're going to meet all of our landscape standards, which means that there will be 2 trees in the front yard, 8 shrubs in a front yard bed. On a corner lot, there'll be an additional tree and 8 shrubs in the side of the home facing the street. So we'll meet all those landscape standards. In terms of buffers, and I know we obviously certainly have some neighbors out here that are interested in seeing how this is going to impact them. There will be buffers that are required on any perimeter of the project we're adjacent to neighbors. It's a buffer yard B, which I believe is either a 20 or 25 foot, but it requires 8 trees and 15 shrubs every 100 feet, so it's a significant buffer on any perimeter. And then also on the interior between use districts that differ. So in between, say, a residential district and an industrial district, there's also a buffer yard required to make sure we got appropriate buffers. So we have made sure, particularly where there's differing land uses, we made sure that there was buffers, but there will be buffers both around any perimeters and also within the development to make sure we've got some protection to existing uses and proposed uses. Again, kind of walking through the village center district. Again, I talked about this is kind of your traditional downtown type development, a little bit more pedestrian oriented, obviously golf cart oriented. They have proposed to meet all of our standards. We did do some flexibility on the landscape standards to allow them. Right now, like we say that trees you have to have a shrub every 3 feet on the perimeter of the parking lot, and literally just one every 3 feet all the way down the line. So they want some flexibility to have some creativity in landscape design. So they want, if they want to clump some of those trees and shrubs in this corner and then have a little bit of break, and then so they'd be able to do that, and some flexibility on the type of materials used. So it doesn't just have to be a deciduous shrub every 3 feet. They can look at other plant types that may be more visually appealing to allow some flexibility there. And that's certainly something that staff is supportive of being able to do, as opposed to having a civil engineer, no offense, a civil engineer just plotting a tree every 30 feet and a shrub every 3 feet, create some interest in terms of the overall design. So other than that, in terms of the architectural standards that we require for non-residential uses, they're intending to meet every one of those standards. Again, very high standards in terms of materials required and landscaping required. Another kind of unique thing that I'll let them talk about a little bit here, because this is a golf course community, or proposed to be a golf course community, they wanted their village center to allow some of the required parking to be accommodated by golf cart parking. So what we've done is, I don't know that we have anything in the Indianapolis market that really has this type of commercial development. But what we did is write in a standard that says that if they can have up to 30% of the required parking in golf cart parking. So if a use is required to have 100 parking spaces, they could have up to 30 spaces that are golf cart parking, and the remaining 70 would have to be auto parking. Just to, again, try to provide for the type of development that they're looking to accomplish here.
And
Quickly,
that's just in the village center.
that's
right?
just in the village center, correct? Yeah, so the more auto-oriented retail and industrial areas, they will have to meet all of our parking standards. That would just be in the village center.
Thank you.
Again, the commercial district, the western south district, again, they're intending essentially to meet all of our architectural and landscape standards here, including thoroughfare and interstate overlay standards where applicable, because this is adjacent to the interstate. So they will be meeting all the standards there. About the only variation that we did is because of the size, the overall scale of the commercial area. Again, we're talking about hundreds of acres, not 50, as we wanted to allow for some additional monument signage more frequently. So if this was an overall development, we say you can have one per frontage. Well, that could be 4,000 feet of frontage and there's only one sign. So we basically have said now, you can have more than one monument sign. They have to be at a major commercial entrance, and they also have size requirements associated with them as well. So we did allow some flexibility there because of the scale of this proposal. In the industrial district, I did want to touch on this a little bit. We approach this in a little bit more unique manner. One, as I mentioned before, the city's economic development strategy has been primarily to get more manufacturing-oriented users in industrial districts, and we've been pretty successful with that recently. And so we really didn't want to get, a big, 1.5 million square foot distribution center that's got 200 employees making $12 an hour. Well, we can't legislate that sort of thing, but what we can do is limit the size of the buildings so they're more oriented towards that. And what we've told the applicant, and I'll tell you also, is that's not to say if the right user comes in and is proposing an 800,000 square foot building, that we wouldn't offer a variance or allow them to do that, but we just want to be able to have the check there that we can say, yeah, for this type of user, this type of building that you're designing and proposing, yes, this makes some sense. So what we did is we put in the ordinance that says that the maximum allowable square footage in the industrial district is 500,000 square feet. So all buildings will have to be less than that. So if anything's proposed larger than that, then we have the ability to kind of control both the use or development and how the building will look to some extent. And related to the architectural standards, right now our ordinance essentially exempts what it terms large-scale industrial buildings. I don't know necessarily what large scale means, but we didn't want necessarily for larger buildings to be exempt from our architectural standards. So what we did is we wrote in some additional architectural standards related to industrial buildings that are going to ensure that we've got high-quality design and development. For example, for any industrial building under 100,000 square feet, they're required to have masonry on all facades of the building, and they're required to have architectural breaks like every 60 feet to again make sure there's some dimension to the building. Those are really important things. You make sure they've got prominent entrances, so you don't just have a door in the side of a warehouse, you have prominent entrances. Again, trying to make sure that we've got good quality architecture on these buildings. It's not just one long facade with maybe a couple of different colors, but there's no architectural detail to those buildings. So we did write in some additional standards there. And again, every building under 100,000 square feet has a masonry requirement attached to it. So that's definitely going to ensure that we've got real high quality architecture. On buildings between 100 and 500,000 square feet, we don't necessarily have a masonry requirement, but we don't allow metal at all. So it would all be tilt-up concrete and other masonry type products. Again, we'll have all the architectural breaks that are required and prominent entrances. So we did want to write in some very specific standards to make sure we're getting high quality architecture out here. And then again, if a user comes in and proposes a 1 million square foot building and they've got jobs that are going to pay $50 an hour, I think we'll be willing to make some changes to what the PUD ordinance suggests in terms of building size to allow something like that to happen. We just want to make sure that we have the ability to, I don't know if dictate's the right word, but have some sort of checks and balances to make sure we're getting the right types of buildings and uses if they're larger buildings like that. So that kind of touches on the overall development, how we approach the design standards. I'll let the applicant talk through kind of the story and the development concept here. The only other thing I point out in terms of utilities and infrastructure, as everybody knows, this is a pretty rural, other than the elementary school out there, it's a pretty rural area. We're working right now on how utilities get extended to the site, and that's in the works and how that happens. In terms of road infrastructure, certainly we have some perimeter roads that aren't right now designed to accommodate the type of traffic that will eventually be created here. So certainly what we'll do as we get into further planning for this, there's going to have to be a traffic impact study done to figure out what kind of trips this is going to generate and what time period and when for example, 400 East might need to be improved to accommodate additional traffic. It will not happen right away, I can tell you that. This is going to take years before it generates the type of traffic that's going to warrant some major improvements out there. There certainly might be some repairs and expansions that might be necessary now just to accommodate any additional traffic. But in terms of adding lanes, making this a 4-lane road or anything like that, it's going to be years before the traffic would warrant that. But those are certainly things that we're taking into consideration with traffic studies as we get into further planning for this, to figure out both what the road will need to be to accommodate this build out and kind of a timing of how that would work too, to make sure we can accommodate those things. The only other major component, certainly of a development of this size, would warrant potentially an additional interchange on the interstate. There's no guarantee that happens, but certainly a project of this size would warrant discussion with NDOT, but ultimately that's in NDOT's control as to if and or when that happens. But certainly discussions will start with NDOT very soon. And that, again, the planning and construction of interchange, as Kevin could tell you about, takes years. So even if we started that tomorrow, you're probably talking 3, 4, 5 years before you'd even see something out there. So again, this development's going to happen in phases. It's not going to happen overnight, so it doesn't warrant an interchange now. But even if we started planning now, it'd be years before it would be there. And certainly it would have to be warranted before NDOT would pull the trigger on that also. So that's a real high level, kind of looking at the technical details. Again, I'll let the applicant tell the story of the development. But does anybody have any just general questions about some of the technical details that I went through?
The only question I have, Ben, is on the facades, they're going to cover all their heating and air conditioning on the top, on the roof?
Yeah, they're required to be screened. That's in our UDO already. They didn't vary from that standard. So if it's going to be roof mounted, they have to be screened from view from the adjacent public roadways. And I do mean directly adjacent, so it's not like if somebody's driving on the interstate and it's higher than the properties adjacent, it doesn't necessarily have to be screened from that. But certainly from the adjacent property lines, you have to make sure that the parapets, et cetera, will screen roof mounted. If they're ground mounted, they have to be screened appropriately as well. So yeah, they don't intend to vary from any standard like that.
Ben, will we see any of these developments come before us in the future once the developer decides which projects they're going to begin with? Will we
Yes.
see each of those individually?
Every one of them will. So so this is just the PUD ordinance and rezone.
Okay.
They'll be required to go through a preliminary plan application for every phase of development that happens out here. So that will come back to the Plan Commission for every preliminary plan that they introduce. So yeah, this is step one of many in order to really start construction out here. So this is the overall concept of 2,000 acres of development. And then as they determine phasing, that first phase, when they're ready to pull the trigger on that, they'll come in and they'll have road layouts, lot layouts, things like that. And that'll all come back through the Plan Commission at that time.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anything more for me before let the applicant?
Think we can have the applicant come forward?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kent Franzen. I'm an attorney practicing with the law firm of Parr Ritchie at 225 West Main Street. And it's my pleasure to be here tonight on behalf of my longtime friend, Steve Hinkie, who is the principal owner of Hinkie Development Company of Westfield, Indiana. Also with Steve this evening is his professional engineer, Phil Sundling, who is passing out materials to all of you. And other members of the management team are here as well.
Thank you.
This is the most exciting project that I've ever seen come to Lebanon, Indiana. I've been living here most of my life. I know there may be some questions, many questions, there should be many questions about a project of this size, because we've never seen anything like this. Carmel's had them, Westfield has had them, Fishers has had them, Zionsville has had them. Lebanon has never had anything like this. So Steve understands that some of you are not familiar with this process. We've not had too many planned unit developments. And so he is going to work through this with you and with staff. This has been underway for several months, working with your staff to try to come up with an ordinance that made sense. It's taken considerable time to assemble this land. Steve does not own this land yet, but he has contracts with the owners of this property to sell the property to his company. subject to him being able to get approval to build what he wants to build. If he can't get zoning approval, or if he can't get the land annexed into Lebanon, then the project won't go forward. So the folks who have filed petitions in support of the annexation are the landowners themselves. No landowners being asked or forced to have their land annexed into the Lebanon involuntarily. They want it in Lebanon, and it makes sense to have the entire project within the confines of the city of Lebanon, because it's much more difficult to develop and regulate and approve and oversee a project, half of which is in the city of Lebanon, is under your jurisdiction, and half of which is in the county and under the county's planning jurisdiction. So part of this is essential that it all be brought into the city of Lebanon. The good news is everyone who's involved in this property, who owns this property, is either already in Lebanon or is willing to become part of Lebanon. We have here with Henke Development Company an applicant that has the demonstrated experience and expertise to actually pull this off. There aren't many that have ever been able to do this in central Indiana, and Steve's company has done it 3 times already. He's done it first with the Bridgewater Club in Carmel, in Westfield, and if you've ever been to the Bridgewater Club, it's a beautiful residential property with some commercial around a country club, several hundred acres. A lot of people thought Westfield couldn't support that sort of home style. We're talking about homes between, well, I don't know what they are today. They're upwards of $1 million apiece. Then he turned his attention to the club at Chatham Hills and on the west side of 31 in Westfield. And that is a similarly successful project that is well underway around a golf course and high-end residential homes with some commercial. Just in the past year, he has announced the development of Holiday Farms on US 421 near Zionsville. Again, a golf course community with residential, high-end residential homes. He'll talk to you tonight about what he contemplates and foresees for Lebanon and why he's chosen Lebanon and this location for his 4th project. He started out as a lawyer, and he got into the real estate business many years ago. He was a lawyer doing real estate, and he quit practicing law and started to develop commercial buildings. Many of the commercial buildings and office buildings in Carmel are his projects. And in recent years, he's turned his attention to these large-scale residential developments that have been extremely successful. So, after the presentation tonight, certainly we'll hear from the community and have questions. Be happy to answer any questions that I can answer, but Steve and his professional engineer, Phil Sundling, will do most of the talking about the details of their project. And after tonight, if you are so inclined, we're asking you for a recommendation to move this forward to the City Council. Positive recommendation with regard to the annexation of this land, about 1,100 acres, and the preliminary approval, subject to the council's final say on the plan unit development ordinance. So I'd like Steve Henke to come forward and talk about his project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Kent. Good evening. My name is Steve Henke. I'm president of Henke Development, and we really appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening to discuss this incredible project with you. I think Kent touched a little bit about my background and some of the things we developed, but I think it might be helpful for all of you to maybe understand and learn a little bit more about what we do and how we've done it. Kent is correct. I started practicing law in the 70s. It seems like a long time ago, but also began developing real estate and building office buildings in Carmel. I've been building and developing now for almost 40 years. We originally developed office buildings on Carmel Drive when Carmel Drive seemed like it was out in the middle of nowhere at that time. But we then began doing more and more development, acquiring additional land. And so by the late 90s, I went of counsel to the firm, and I'm still of counsel to the firm, but but do all real estate development. One of the, I did some residential development in Carmel, and then was able to acquire a 600-acre parcel, which is now called the Bridgewater Club. It's on the north, it's right on 146th Street, about a mile east of Meridian 31. And that property, we acquired that over a 4 or 5 year period. I actually planted a tree farm on it and raised about 100,000 trees, knowing it was going to take some time before it was ready for development. And so we then began developing that property around '02. And that property is now about a 900-acre development. We were able to acquire additional ground over a period of time. It's what I would call a lifestyle community. It's one of those things that we can go out and you can develop a 40-acre parcel, a 30-acre parcel, an 80-acre parcel, but you can't get all of the amenities, the trails, the lifestyle and everything that people really want when you have a large property like this that you can land plan and lay out the entire property. So Bridgewater is a combination of commercial. There's assisted living, there's independent living, there's a grocery there, and there's Walgreens, all types of amenities that you can actually drive your golf cart, to. So Bridgewater is probably now somewhere around close to $600 million in assessed value. At one point in time, it was 25% of the entire tax base of Westfield. I remember when we started Bridgewater, we did a very limited demographic study. And at that time, they said, well, Westfield will only be able to absorb $600,000 homes a year. And I looked at my partner and I said, well, we've got about a 50-year supply in this first section that we're doing. We actually sold out of almost all of that in a 3 or 4 year period. A big part of that, as I said earlier, is the lifestyle, is creating trails and creating amenities and also creating a clubhouse that has a lot of amenities, for families. Following that, Bridgewater, we then began acquiring ground that is now Chatham Hills. I don't know if you've heard of Chatham Hills, but Chatham Hills is now a residential mixed-use golf course community from 191st Street on 31 up to 38. We began developing that about 4 years ago. We hosted Homerama at that and had the largest Homerama they had ever had. In fact, we've now hosted 2 Homeramas there. Similar type thing, homes of different price ranges. Chatham Hills, their homes are in that $600,000 up to $2.5 million. I would say the average probably at that point is around $900,000. Lots of trails, again, lots of amenities, the clubhouse, things like that. The picture you're looking at there is actually Chatham Hills. That's the clubhouse that we built. Again, we really appeal to families, and whether you live in the community, you can also join, be members of the club, social members, or golf. In that clubhouse that you're looking at, the picture, we actually have an indoor swimming pool. We have an indoor basketball court. I mean, what club in Indiana shouldn't have a hardwood basketball court? So we actually have that. Very helpful for youth and kids camps and things like that. We host a variety of those, as well as 3-on-3 basketball leagues that these guys don't feel like they're too old to think of what I am. So anyway, we also have a 4-lane bowling alley. We did not have that at Bridgewater, but the whole concept is all about family and bringing everybody together. And not everybody plays golf. In fact, nationally, 60% of the people who live in a golf course community don't play golf. But they like the open space, they like the green space, they like to be part of that community. So we also have a simulator lounge there where you can hit balls all winter long inside. You can play other courses on a simulator. We also have restaurants. There's 2 restaurants in the clubhouse. We have tennis courts, pickleball courts, outdoor pool, and so forth. So it becomes really like a large community center as part of the community. It brings everybody together. You might have noticed the red barn that you're seeing in the lower part there. That red barn is on 38. That was part of the original, one of the properties that we acquired from a family that had acquired it in 1835. And that barn was built sometime around 1840, all hand-hewn timbers and so forth. It was falling down. We restored it. I had not restored many things, and I think I tripled my budget in restoring that. But it now hosts 22 to 26 weddings every year. Gearin High School has their high school prom there. Lots of corporations have functions there and business events taking place there. The golf course you can see to the right-hand side, we have direct access to the Monon Trail. We're excited about the extending the trail, improving the trail here. The Monon actually goes right through Chatham Hills, and so that's a real asset, not only for people locating on the Monon, but also for people easy access to walk the trail, ride their bikes on the trail. I think did you have just before that? Did you have Bridgewater? Yep. Yeah. That's the club. The upper left-hand corner is the clubhouse at Bridgewater. Again, on that one, that was our first one. We did not have a bowling alley. Otherwise, have most of the amenities. We also did not have a gym. We have about a 15,000 square foot fitness center in each one of them. All types of cardio equipment, all types of exercises, aerobics of all type. Not only Bridgewater, but also in Chatham Hills. That's a picture of the golf course, the first hole, and of course another picture of another golf hole below. That's one of the homes in Bridgewater. And these are homes from Chatham Hills, homes on the golf course, off the golf course. We have a variety of homes. As I said, we'll have homes anywhere, from your 50-foot lots, 100-foot lots, 120-foot lots. A lot of empty nesters. You want the smaller lots. They don't want to maintain, their yards or snow removal, and so that's all done for them. But we put those in. We put them in such areas where your more expensive home is in one area and your empty nester might be another area. We try and generally locate the empty nester closer to the clubhouse, easier access, walk to, and that type thing. Next. This is our current project that we're in the middle of Chatham also, but also we're now doing a project in Zionsville. On 421, as Ken indicated, we're directly across the street from Interactive Academy, if you know where that is on 421, between 116th and 146th Street. The picture to your left shows would have 421 on the right side of that picture. Those are layouts that we've just incorporated into that development. There are two major trails that will be part of that development. There will be a trail from 421 going to what would be your left-hand side. That's Eagle Creek flowing down the west side of the property, which would be the left side as you're looking at it. And we'll be doing a clubhouse there. We're doing a really neat entryway there. It's a very wooded property, and so we're curving the road so that when you first come in, you're not looking down a long road. In other words, you're looking at woods all surrounding it. Every lake there you see we have dug and are making part of it. That's also a part of the property here is relatively flat, so we'll be digging a lot of lakes and creating a lot of elevation changes from that. That's good obviously for drainage, because drainage is a really important part. I know I've worked with Mr. Dye, who just passed away recently, Pete Dye, world golf course architect, and Pete his first question was always, where's the drainage go? And I remember in Chatham, beautiful hillside, we pull up and there's trees all around, and I'm really excited to show him, isn't this a beautiful sight? And I said, well, so what do you think, Pete? And he said, where's the water go? Where's the water go? So we had to go out on Meridian to see how large the culvert was going under Meridian to see how much water he had to retain and hold there. There's the bridge in the upper right-hand corner was an iconic bridge built in the late 1800s. Was knocked down by a concrete truck, I think, in the early 2000s, and then a farmer with the disc and so forth attaching to it, and the whole bridge came down a couple years ago on that. So we will be incorporating and using that all part of the trail system. There's a major trail that comes directly from Zionsville called the Tricky Foot Trail. That will come in, and we'll have like a trail head where that then merges with the Holiday Trail, which will come from 421. And so those would then be utilizing that bridge with golf cart traffic as well as your walking, bicycles, and so forth. Just to the north of that, Mr. Holliday, who passed away a few years ago, donated 50 acres to the town of Zionsville for a nature park. And so the current owners of that property are in agreement to allow us to put a trail, not only across the bridge, but a trail connecting to that nature park, which, again, trails, walking, just as you have the potential for a great trail here in Lebanon are keys to these developments. That's Pete actually swinging a club out in the weeds there. His wife Alice made him do that, and he's like, "What am I hitting here?" But that's Mr. Dye. In conjunction with that, and before even doing completing or starting the development at Chatham, we developed Grand Park. Grand Park is a sports complex. I'm sure most of you probably have heard of it and probably have kids that have played there or grandkids and so forth. The town or the city of Westfield decided they wanted an economic driver for sports tourism. They decided that would be something they wanted to do. And we talked about different areas. They were looking at different sites because one of the main things they wanted to do was generate economic development. And the economic development is what also pays off the park. So I suggested to the mayor that the northwest quadrant of 31 and 32 would be a prime location, to do that as far as, developing, restaurants and shops and hotels and things like that. And so the city then, we were able to put together 400 acres of ground for them. The city then approached us and said, "Would you develop this property for us?" And so we actually developed that. It was about a 3-year period. Again, a lot of lakes. That's another site where there wasn't a lake there, but we tried to incorporate lakes aesthetically as well as functionally, for drainage, irrigation, and so forth. You'll notice we put parking at various areas all around the park. So instead of a lot of times you see complexes that have one major parking, and it takes forever to get in, forever to get out. We dispersed them all around the park, so it's easy access. Plus, it's much easier walking to and from the fields than having to walk past 8 soccer fields to get to where you want to go. So that Grand Park has been a huge success. There's been a lot of commercial development around there. We actually did a deal with a Marriott Spring Hill Suites that was just built on 31. We have a Marriott Courtyard coming in, Cambria Suites, also on the south side, a $16 million assisted living facility also went in there, as well as all the restaurants and so forth you see on 32, the McDonald's, Culver's, and Wendy's and so forth. These are just pictures of Grand Park, the fields at night. Of course, there's also the event center, your upper picture, upper right-hand side. That has 3 full-size indoor soccer fields. The Colts now are making that their training camp each year. I think they committed a 10-year agreement to do that. One of the first games we ever had in the park was in the early spring, in February or something, where Notre Dame played, I think, West Virginia, Virginia Tech, and it's something we certainly had not contemplated. And I remember scrambling around. We actually managed the park for the city the first year, to get it going, scrambling around. Oh, who's going to sing the national anthem? So, the first game we have to have that. So a lot of thought, a lot of details, went into building that. Even more details than a subdivision, synthetic turf, and all the, what size, what granular backfill you want, sand, and so forth. So, but those are pictures again of kids using the park. So this comes to our location here at Lebanon. This property became available to us. It was on the market, and some people presented it to us as a potential. We think Lebanon is right in the target for more upscale and future development. Westfield, as I said, in 02, 03, people thought we couldn't do it, but what we did again was create that lifestyle. And created that thing where the families have so much to do, the kids, the grandkids. We have so many empty nesters moving to our neighborhoods too, because when their grandkids come over, they have things to do. They can hop on a golf cart, they can go get lunch, they can go to the pool, they can go bowl and do all these type of things. I think Ben pointed out the difference in the green and the blue there. The green is currently annexed, the blue would be future annexed. There is a separate 150 acre parcel up next to the fairgrounds that is part of the PUD, but really would not be part of the main part of the campus. This is the layout that Ben was going over as far as where the village center would be and things like that. Road 400 is on your right-hand side, and you see the purple there, as he mentioned. That would be, we see that as being a village center. By village center, a place where you can take your golf cart to, you can ride a bike to, you can walk to. If you look at all the current trends in the country, one, everybody wants trails, everybody wants amenities, okay? But they also want to be able to walk to the villages. I mean, you see it in your downtowns, whether it's Carmel, Zions, when people want to be able to walk, to shops, restaurants. We're actually doing that at Chatham now too. We just acquired some additional ground there between 31 and Chatham. We're doing a village center with a lake, and that's similar to what we're doing. We'd be doing here, doing a large lake that would anchor kind of the village center. It'd be aesthetically a really a pretty place to sit and have ice cream and coffee and restaurants and so forth. So that's the purple area that I was talking about. Then the green area would all be residential, and again, you have the trail that would be crossing diagonally through the property. Would have a road connecting up to road 100. You have 65 on the west side. We do hope to try and get an interchange there at some point in time. We think with an interchange there, we have a great potential of having really high-end, upscale office buildings, medical facilities, and so forth located there. We have also, if you look at the road just to the counter. If you look at the orange, yellow, whatever you want to call that, and then you see a light blue along the industrial area there, that's a lake that's probably about 8 or 10 acres. It's hard to put this in scale when you're looking at it because it's a 2,000 acre property. But one of the things we're doing there is buffering and doing a large lake there along the eastern perimeter of that industrial property. We also have a 20-acre park, and it's hard to, you can see the small line there, but that small line through there represents about 20 acres. So we would have trails going throughout that area in addition to, the main trail, the abandoned rail trail. We would have that trail and then the trails coming in and going into the village center. Next. This gives you an example of some of the type of village centers and so forth and commercial that you can see. Again, when you're planning large scale on something like this, we see the more the retail commercial, larger box and so forth on or near 65. We see the other areas being more of a village center. And these are pictures of renderings showing what certainly can be in that. This is, when you come to the village itself, we're looking at doing a lot of this type of look where you have sort of a New England type look, crisp, sharp, colors, but yet very warm, very down to earth. The Haagen-Dazs ice cream shop there in the lower left-hand corner is actually an ice cream shop that was in the Villages in Florida, and that sits on the water. So the other shops and so forth, again, very warm, great feeling, and really creates that village feel. We see potential for a community center, in that area. Also, that area is going to grow and expand even besides what we have there. But part of our planning, whether it's for education, we've certainly talked to the schools. The schools are very supportive of our project, but we see a potential for something like that. These are actual pictures taken from Chatham. Of course, you have the fire pit, people sitting around the fire pit in the lower left-hand corner. That's, of course, the restaurant in the background. The picture above is the bowling alley. Actually, a 4-lane bowling alley that there's so many kids' parties, there's so many adult parties, even adult leagues. Different sections of the subdivision are get bowling shirts and are coming in and bowling and having a great time. Spinning classes, that's part of the fitness center that you see on the right-hand side there. It's also an excellent opportunity when you're doing a larger development like this to have more amenities, for the kids and families, a larger playground versus sometimes in some developments, and I suppose they can't help it when you're doing a 40-acre development, 30, you might have a couple swing sets or something small. But when you're doing something like this, it allows you to raise everything to a higher level. Again, playgrounds, water activities can become an important part. The upper right-hand corner, there's also a possibility in doing a community center and in doing inside water slides. Golf, you're saying, where is that guy hitting that ball? But we envision the clubhouse being very close to the village center on Road 400. And you saw the larger lake that was next to that. We see that as being an aqua range, a water range. And that's very popular in Florida. One of the things that you're doing there, you actually see some of the holes out in the water that are anchored out there, floats. And so people are aiming for that. It's a slightly restricted golf ball. You never have to wash the balls, obviously, and the wind takes it to one side or the other, and everybody picks the balls up from there. But that's something there too that could be not only part of the club, but also could be part of the village center, which is all the public and everything too coming in to utilize that and having fun in the in the village. These are homes, are examples of homes we see in the area from paired living in the upper corner, empty nester homes. Through there's just a variety of homes. We see homes in this development probably starting somewhere in the $225,000, $250,000, somewhere in that area, on up to $700,000, $800,000 or more. I mean, it just depends on what the market does. But we believe that Lebanon is poised to be in that position with its location on 65, with the growth it has now, with the wonderful amenities that they've now developed in the downtown, with all of that coming together. I think that's a really important thing that residents of this community would really enjoy. So these are the different types of homes. Again, you have them in different areas as far as whether you're located on water, whether you're located in the village, or throughout the development. As I said, it's a 2,000-acre development, so it's something that you're spreading out, and it does take time. I think Ben mentioned that too, that this is not something that is done in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. I mean, you take a Bridgewater is about a 900-acre development, 1,000 acres, something like that, and it's basically being completed now. So that's probably a 15, 18-year development. Chatham Hills has gone much faster than we anticipated. We're developing ground there that we thought we wouldn't develop for 2 more years, and we've been developing it 2 years. So we thought we'd be 5 years in one area, the front 9, and we're actually 2 or 3 years into the back 9 already. Holiday Farms has gone really, really well. I think we've in just this year, starting and selling of lots, I think we've already sold maybe 130 lots already this summer and our last winter. Next. This is an example of homes in the upper left-hand corner as you get more into the village area, closer to the clubhouse and so forth, where you can bring in different architecture elements like your picket fences and things like that to create character to the homes. That would be a rear alley type entry home there. And I think it's really been great working with your staff, working with Ben, the mayor, and everything. We've had accomplished a lot in just a short period of time. So we're excited about all different levels there. I think as Ben indicated, there's one item we're still hope to work out, and should get worked out this week on the architecture on bringing a garage forward. We have homes that are $700,000, $800,000 homes with a garage forward. Instead of not having to reseat it, we're willing to write in whatever architectural standards we need to assure that those homes are going to be above that 200, 225, 250 or above, range for something like that. Next. These are paired living homes that is in Zionsville, and we see a great need for this as part of the overall development too. It's a great empty nester product. One of the things we see is in our developments is one, it helps keep and attract people to the area, work, employment, living, and so forth. But it also brings in a lot of grandparents when you have a resort type living. I think at one point in time recently we were looking at maybe 1 in 5, 1 in 6 of our residents of Chatham were coming from Chicago. Their kids have jobs down here as the market is expanding, and so they're wanting to be closer to their grandkids. Maybe not necessarily their kids, but more so their grandkids. So we see that as a really common denominator. That's happening also in Zionsville, happened to Bridgewater too. It gives them a place where they can go, they can meet new people, especially in new development. You're meeting a lot of new people coming in, and gives them activities. And when their kids are here and grandkids, the grandkids want to come back because they feel like they're on vacation. In fact, one of the things that we hear so often in our developments is when I return from work the day and I get pulled into development, I feel like I'm on vacation. And that's something that's really special that we're proud to have achieved. As part of the village also, you would see your townhomes, and those are examples of townhomes. One of the things we're doing in Zionsville is townhomes on the corner of Willow and 421. Incorporated in those, we're looking more at first floor living. In the past townhomes, you'd go second floor, third floor, whatever, and a lot of people don't want the stairs. I know I don't. So you're seeing a lot more master bedroom, first floor living, and then your second, third bedrooms up. So really, all of your living can be in the lower level. These are examples of more commercial, again along 65, as that would develop out more of a retail component, not your village type feel, and so that's again architecture. We try and get a common architectural theme, a common architectural element. If you go look at Bridgewater, you'll see a similar type brick used on the buildings in that area. Just another example of a larger user. Again, this is way down the road. You have to have your rooftops for that, but you plan for it now. That's the beauty. That's the beauty of having a 2,000-acre property. Is you can really plan ahead and plan those areas so it's not all somewhat hodgepodge with 100 acres here and 50 here and so forth. This we see with the visibility with 65 a great opportunity for Class A office space on 65 as part of that, especially if we can get an interchange in that location too. Again, another box user you would see in the 65 area. This is the office warehouse and tech type buildings that we would envision near 65. Again, as I mentioned earlier, buffered with lakes and buffered with the 20-acre park and so forth. Down to it all completes a whole like community within a community. Again, just another example of office and tech. And that brings us back to the overall layout. Again, you can see there where the lake is, where I was talking about the Aqua Range. We would see some golf holes around that also, so that people in the village are looking across the water, seeing people golf. Lots of activities and amenities through there. So with that, I'll be here and I'll be glad to answer any questions that any of you have either now or after any public comments. But we certainly appreciate your time and appreciate the opportunity to present this, and certainly have appreciated working with your staff and the mayor in hopefully bringing this lifestyle community to Lebanon. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone on the board have any questions? Ben, you have anything else you want to say yet before we open up to the public hearing? Okay, when we open it up to the public, you're going to have 3 minutes to speak, okay? And there's a lot of people, I think, wants to speak, probably. So we're going to try to hold you to 3 minutes. And also be sure you give your name and address then you can sign in over here if you haven't done that yet, after, okay? Anyone else? Anybody wants to speak? Come forward, give your name.
My name is Bonnie Preston. I'm also an attorney. My husband and I, Bill, we just moved here in 2018. And I'm not as concerned about the architectural standards and if they're going to have cement or if they're going to have concrete or what they're going to have for their house. I'm more concerned because we live on 400 East, right kind of across the street from Perryworth School. I'm more concerned about lights at night from large buildings. We moved here because we wanted to look like our neighbor at the stars, and we can't see the stars if there's a lot of lights. So we'd be concerned about that. We'd be concerned about smells from factories or whatever other buildings they're going to build, and noise we'd be concerned about. I would be concerned, my kids are almost graduated. My daughter's a senior and my son's at Purdue. But I would be concerned as a board, if I were on the board, at how the infrastructure is going to assimilate this large amount of people. I was looking, we don't know, we aren't from here, but I was looking, and Whitestown kids go to Zionsville and Lebanon schools. So there's already extra kids going to Lebanon schools. I don't know where the kids from these houses are going to go to school, and I don't know where people are going to get a doctor and where they're going to get a hospital. And I also would worry about the existing infrastructure in Lebanon itself. I mean, there's already a Walgreens or a CVS or whatever. There's already these little stores. What's going to happen if they, 2 miles, 3 miles away, have a whole nother section of these stores? And I can't imagine that there's going to be a Walmart or a Myers for a big box store, because Walmart and Myers aren't going to build at this new place. They've already got a Meijer down in Whitestown. They've already got a Walmart up in Lebanon. So I would worry about that. I guess I would want to know more about what's actually coming in, because I don't see how the current infrastructure, not just the roads. I mean, I get that they might have to do something to roads and, so more people can travel on them, and traffic studies, and I get that. But I would be concerned of how the actual infrastructure that's already here is going to take care of all the people that are going to move in. Also, where are you going to get, 500,000 gallons of water a day if you've got all those people, and there's an average amount of water each house uses. Where are you going to get that? And we also had some questions about the trails. I guess I asked at the last meeting at the elementary school if people could use the facilities like the golf club and all that, and he said yes. There would be a fee. They envision about $1,500 to join, and then there'd be a monthly fee. But my question is more like, are any of these properties going to be a gated community, or can anybody and their brother walk on the trails? So, what if because like right now, you can go over to some housing development, you can just walk on the property if you want. Is that going to be the case, or is it going to be gated at all? And I think that might be it.
Okay, your time's up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jim Wilcox. I live out on Holmes Road. And I understand the need for development, but to do it in a wise way, especially here in Lebanon. Everybody seems to be developing except us. We're just bringing in warehouse stuff.
You move the microphone a little bit closer. Yeah.
Excuse me. Anyways, I think it's 1998, this council had passed the Subdivision Control Act or ordinance, and what it was is to limit the development and taking farmland away, tillable farmland away from the agricultural end of development in Indiana. Anyways, I was just curious and everything, if every effort has been made to sell this property or to leave it in agricultural hands versus, covering it over with asphalt. Because as time goes on, as the population increases, the demand for tillable farmland is going to be very, very valuable. And right now, they're posing that question on a national basis, too. And we're very limited in tillable farmland. So I was just wondering if that had been considered or will be considered. Obviously, back in 1998, they were thinking about it. That's why you passed the ordinance for it. And I'm just curious if that's being looked at. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Shannon Kiley. I'm a veterinarian in Boone County. And we moved here. We live on Holmes Road. We moved here 6 years ago because we loved this community. It was a rural community. It was a simple life. There wasn't lots of traffic, and there wasn't lots of housing developments with amenities. And I want to know what the government is going to do to protect us. Because none of us here live in Lebanon to have a bowling alley and a golf course and housing developments. That's why we don't live out here because of that. We live out here because we love the land and we love the wildlife. And I love to be able to see the stars at night and not somebody's big giant country club. So I want to know what the government's going to do to protect us and to keep our community a rural community, a farm community. Eventually, we're going to run out of farmland. Who's going to feed the cows? Who's going to have grain for the horses? Am I going to be able to ride my horse around here? Am I going to have to use somebody's golf course? And again, we moved out here to enjoy country life, and I feel like this development is not what most of us want here. And we love Lebanon because it's a simple, rural, fun, kind place to live. And I feel like bringing in strangers, and not that I'm opposed to having new people come and live in Lebanon, and not that I'm opposed to some degree of development, but this is not a neighborhood community. This is a farm community. And I love it because it is a farm community. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next.
I'm Richard Vonnegut from Indianapolis. I'm with Indiana Trails, and we are the ones that own the property, the long strip property that goes through part of this. And we own it not only here, but near Hazel Rig, we own some land. I want to suggest and ask consideration for a couple of things. One is an item called Trail Towns, and I don't know if you've heard it or not. It comes out of Pennsylvania and the Maryland area. Basically, it's communities that adopt trails and the users of trails to make the communities more appealing to trails, invite them into the community, and therefore the people are friendly, they come back and they'll spend more money. In doing this, there's two aspects. One is a trail or trail system, and two is land development. As far as the trails go, I would like to suggest 3 types of trails, something like streets. Use the Big Four trail, of which we have own segments, and we're something of a wholesaler. We don't usually develop trails, we can, but where developers or where the Friends of Boone County Trail comes in, to develop a long-distance trail, not only from Indianapolis through Lebanon to Lafayette, but on to Chicago, but also to have a secondary system of trails that interlace within the development and city of Lebanon, and then have tertiary that go into neighborhood streets, but have crossings and so forth, and sometimes even divide pedestrian from bicycling, since both are important, but both have somewhat different dimensions to them. The other element is the land use, and that is to have trails is wonderful, but they're used and they have destination points. The destination points tend to be more friendly when they tend to be somewhat smaller. So we can talk about Myers, we can talk about Kroger, but if there's local grocery stores, as an example, the Ma and Pa stores, bicycle shops, ice cream shops, things of that sort, but also to have bicycle racks at the shops, and to have perhaps hotels, somewhat smaller hotels, to have camping grounds. You don't necessarily think of camping grounds, but in deference to a rural community, have it not necessarily in Lebanon or in the community, but halfway to Zionsville or out and about there. The idea is to cater to bicyclists, to long-distance hikers, and one example is we at Indiana Trails oversee the American Discovery Trail, which runs from from Delaware to Cincinnati, and then through Evansville, and then on over to California. We oversee the part through southern Indiana, and I am very sensitive to long-distance bicycling, long-distance hiking, but also very short bicycling and very short hiking for errands and for getting around town. And I will be glad to leave my card with you and talk with you later about just introducing these ideas.
Right, thank you.
My name's Susie Beal. I live on 400. My concern, I'm kind of with most of us, we know the development's something's going to develop, city's pushing out. My concern is with the planned unit development, is there any kind of restriction on a minimum percentage or maximum percentage of the different types of districts within that development? So if something goes south somewhere along the way, is some of that housing that's currently the green in the map going to turn into the yellow industrial, or the blue, or I'm sorry if the colors were wrong, but industrial versus commercial and that sort of thing? Or, because for instance, he mentioned that he added more in Chatham Hills for more the lifestyle living and the more small commercial. So that's my concern, is if the green gets smaller and the yellow and the blue get a lot bigger, and even the purple would get bigger, how much is that going to happen? Or is there any kind of a cap or contractually based caps or minimums on the residential and caps on the industrial? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we have a couple more. There you go.
My name's Mike Holdman, and I live on 100 South. I was just wondering, when you take a look around downtown Lebanon, you see a lot of vacant buildings, closed shops. We just spent a lot of money narrowing our corners so that trucks couldn't get around a corner. We went to a lot of trouble to make it harder to get around downtown. We have all this money put into trying to revitalize our downtown, and then something like this comes in, and all of the money that it's going to take for water and utilities and electric and so forth to get out to this area to develop all this is going to be a huge cash outlay for the city, because it's going to be all city property now. And
I was just wondering, how, does the city have all of this financial stuff worked out where you're going to be able to provide utilities and everything to this area, the infrastructure, and how long is it going to take to build schools and hospitals or convenient care facilities or something like that, to service all these people, and the timeline it's going to take before you start collecting property tax value or property tax revenue from all of these people. You talk about a $600,000 to $700,000 home. That's a pretty good tax bill, and that as you pay taxes in arrears, you're going to have 3 or 4 years of outlay where you're going to have none of this money coming in, and you're going to still have to be upfront with putting in the utilities and the infrastructure, and I just don't know if you have it all planned to pay for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, my name is Mike Nastav. I live at 1170 Holmes Road, which is kind of in the middle of all the excitement. We bought back in '96 and built in '97, so we've been there for a substantial amount of time, paying property taxes and living off the gravel road for a while. But we're not originally from this area. Obviously, my wife's from Carmel, and I'm from Indianapolis, 86th Street area. So we've seen a lot of this urban development happen a lot of times. I guess I wanted to voice my concern with the blue on the map and the yellow on the map. I don't want to wake up one morning and have my property, I've got 9 acres in that Holmes Road area. I don't want to wake up next to a warehouse or or an office park. Another concern is the cookie cutter houses. I think the plan that we saw here today at least shows a nice scaled neighborhood. Our house is not huge, but it's sizable. It's a 2-story, 1,300 square feet with a finished basement. I'd like to see something in that area around us, so it doesn't hurt our property values too much when the development goes on. So I just wanted to put that out there, because I don't know what kind of restrictions you guys are going to have with utilities and everything like that. I know that it would be nice to have some of the city benefits where we are. But I trust you guys will do it in a scaled manner, so that way it'll be something we'll be able to afford as a city. So.
Anyone else? Aaron?
Hello, my name's Aaron Smith. I reside here in Lebanon at 2625 Countryside Drive. If I understand the comprehensive plan correctly, our brand-new comprehensive plan, it does not anticipate commercial and industrial in this particular land area. It looks like to me that commercial and industrial will develop much more quickly than residential, that what will drive residential will be the construction of the golf course. And I would like to ask Mr. Henke, when does he anticipate constructing the golf course?
About the same time we begin construction development.
And by what time do you anticipate beginning the construction of the development?
Spring of '21.
Spring of '21. So you're going, just to make sure I understand what you're saying, you intend to build a golf course as one of your first development projects?
Yes, that would be the very early stages.
Thank you.
My name is Michael Beal. I live on 400, just south of the development on the Worth side. This is a very popular property. As you look back on the history, it was going to be a water park. It was going to be a golf course. Mel Kenyon talked about a dirt track. I mean, a lot of things have been looked at this property. It's very, very popular that way. Recognizing development is coming, either you're insane or you have your head in the sand. I get it. I love the country. That's why I moved there. I love the dark. Grew up on a farm. That's the life I enjoy. Just concerns about how this all plays out. We've experienced 10 years of very nice economic progress. If, when that turns south, how does this play out? What are we looking at? What kind of an eyesore potential, things like that. When I first heard about this, it was laid out, there could be as many as 2 golf courses. We've got golf courses struggling. I mean, what makes us think that these golf courses are going to survive where Cool Lake Trophy Club are struggling so much? And Lebanon Utilities, last I heard, has no word of this. So I mean, infrastructure, this has come on very quick. How quickly can we realistically have this ready to go? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ben, you have anything else to say? Okay, I'll close the public hearing if nobody else is wanting to speak. I appreciate your time that you gave us, and we'll close the public hearing at this point. And Ben, you can speak again, please.
I will start by addressing some of the questions that I can as it relates to the city and enforcing current ordinances, et cetera. So where I can address them, I will, and I'm sure there are some that the applicant will address from his development timeline, et cetera. One of the first comments I hear is there's concerns about lights and light spillage. We do have standards related to lighting. It only requires a certain amount of light at the property lines, so there should not, I mean, certainly there is going to be more light than what a cornfield would generate for sure, but we do have light standards that make sure that there's not light spillage over the property lines over a certain level, and they are fairly strict, so all the lights will have to be shielded and make sure that there's not light spillage. So we do address that in our current ordinance, and they're not asking to vary from that in any way, shape, or form. There's talks about being concerned about smells from factories or noise from factories. We don't require, we're not going to allow heavy industry out here, so things that have nasty smells or make a lot of noise are not permitted. This is more light manufacturing, assembly, distribution, those sorts of things. Heavy industry is not permitted in any way, shape, or form out here. And again, everything is all enclosed. There's no outside storage. There's no activity outside the building, so this is all meant to be very light and unobtrusive, as much as industrial can be for sure. So we do have noise standards that require certain levels. You have to stay below certain levels at the property line, so we can, if there are certain things that do become louder, we can make sure to address those as well if something does come up. So we do address those things. I know there's mention about schools and school capacity. I know our school system right now has significant capacity in the system already. We are adding people from Whitestown, but that's actually really just keeping our school population to current levels. It's not actually adding population. So we do have capacity for over 1,000 kids in the school system already. That being said, development of this size over time is going to require additional school facilities. But at that time, there will be a lot more kids in the school system. There's there's additional revenue coming in the school system, but they are starting to plan for the idea over the next 15 to 20 years that another facility might be needed somewhere down in this area. But for sure, for the foreseeable future, they have capacity in the existing system. There was some mention about the subdivision control ordinance was created to essentially save agricultural property for agricultural development. That's not necessarily what the subdivision control ordinance is intended to do. The comprehensive plan does identify certain properties for specific kind of developments and others to remain in agricultural, but the subdivision control ordinance, what that does is it provides developments and design standards if somebody were to develop a subdivision, so it doesn't necessarily restrict them. In terms of trails, we as staff and as a city, we're very attuned to the idea of developing trail networks and sidewalk systems that connect amenities and connect homes, et cetera. We do require bicycle racks on any commercial or retail or office use. So that's already in our ordinance. It requires bicycle racks for every one of those users. So we do accommodate that sort of mode of transportation as well. But certainly this is going to be a very connected development. We have trail requirements on main roads. We have trail requirements within communities, and certainly the main driver in terms of trails here is the Big Four extension through the development. That's a really important part of what the city is wanting to accomplish and develop over the next few years, is that Big Four connection down to our neighbors to the south. There was some mention of utilities. Certainly, Lebanon Utilities are taking a very close look at this. They've already got some preliminary concepts of how they are going to serve this area. Keep in mind, though, that the primary cost to serve this site is going to be borne by the developer, not by the city. So those extensions from their existing locations down to the development, that's a cost of development. So in addition to that, we also have availability fees that each user pays, both a home and non-residential uses. So in addition to the fact that the developer is going to be primarily responsible to extend the utilities, we also have revenue coming in to essentially, quote unquote, allow them to connect to our existing system, provide the availability to them. So while those are all things being worked out, primarily speaking, the costs are going to be associated to the developer, not to the city. We do have capacity that's being added to our existing system. There's some other things on the water side that need to be done to service this property, but they've already got some concept. The utilities already have some concepts of how to do that. So it's not outside the realm of possibility to be able to serve this in a timely fashion. Again, phase one is not going to create a significantly huge demand that couldn't be served by our existing system. We just got to get it to them, and there are plans for already how to do that. There was mention about the comprehensive plan destination, the recently completed comprehensive plan. I will just say that it's not too often that a land use committee or a comprehensive plan committee gets to sit down and say, we think that there's going to be a 2,000 acre mixed use development in this area of the community. Those don't happen maybe but once in a lifetime. So it's hard to envision those things to happen. So the idea that we would have been able to sit down and say, we really think that there could be a new $30 million interchange here that supports a 2,000 acre development, that's a hard concept for a committee to be able to figure out and put on a comprehensive plan. So yes, right now, that committee was asked to say, over the next 5 to 10 years, where do we think development might occur? So that committee said, in the next 5 to 10 years, we expect around the periphery of the, kind of the existing developed city, we expect to see some expansion out. And we think at the southern end, down by 267, there might be some development that starts down there and moves north. That, if you're thinking about kind of from a comprehensive perspective of the community, that's where we would think that the development would occur in the next 5 to 10 years. It's kind of hard for somebody to visualize and imagine that there's the potential for a development of this size and this scale in a certain area. So yes, right now the comprehensive plan designation does not necessarily contemplate something like this, but the people on that comprehensive plan committee couldn't have contemplated something like this to come. I think I've addressed most of the things that I can address from a city perspective, from comprehensive planning and UDO perspective. Any other questions related to some of those things I brought up?
Any other questions?
One of them made a comment about the PUD and any restrictions in the future.
Yeah.
Just comment on how they would actually have to come back and ask again.
Yeah. There was one question about if the market changes and they decide they want more commercial or less of something else. What we've written in there is that they allow some flexibility to change it up to 30%, but not to say, gosh, this residential thing is not working, we need to make it all commercial. That is not permitted. So essentially, we've drawn the boundaries of each one of these districts. We allow some flexibility to move it a little bit, but not to make wholesale change to that. If they did say, gosh, we can't make this district work, that would be something that would have to come back to the Plan Commission for a public meeting like this. So yeah, we do address that in there to allow some flexibility so that the boundaries of the districts aren't necessarily rigid, but not to allow them just wholesale changes without some sort of approval here.
So Ben, any sort of changes that would come to us, they would have to come back here and we would have to talk about it.
Yeah, so the ordinance, like I said, does write some flexibility to allow to move the boundary slightly, but not major changes. If there's any sort of major change or something that staff feels is beyond what the ordinance allows, it would definitely have to come back to the Plan Commission and Council in order to get those changes considered.
Any other questions?
I have a question, but more towards the developer side.
I would, while Steve's coming back here, but just to add one thing to Ben's comments. In 2007 and then again in 2017, the city undertook an effort to redo our comprehensive thoroughfare plan. Both of those thoroughfare plans did envision a new interchange in the general vicinity of 250 to 300 South, and the study suggested further warrant and study should be performed in the future. So we have kind of been targeting this area, and obviously if we're targeting a potential interchange, there's a lot of development opportunity that comes with that. So just to add on to that, from a comprehensive planning standpoint, the thoroughfare plan it is adopted by the city and has envisioned a more intensive development of that area for, since 2007.
Thank you. I was going to also add in response to Bonnie and Mike's concerns, I think Ben touched on it, as far as lights, smells, things like that. We also are very, very strict and tight on those type of things too. It's our residents too that are living right next door to these, and so we have a vested interest, certainly vested interest in our residents as well as the residents in the neighborhood. We also are doing buffering and committed to doing buffering on any properties adjacent to it. Trails, I think Bonnie also asked about trails. Are they gated or public? Of course, the main trail would be public. Most of the trails in development are public. There can be a gated section and there may not even be a trail in a certain gated section. In Zionsville, we just did the community gated, and we did public trails through it. We wanted the interconnectivity of neighborhoods, and they're doing like a trail hub inside, of the development too. So we recognize that as being important. Richard indicated on trails. I think I've indicated we love trails. We started doing trails before trails were really that popular and important, and we did them in Bridgewater. We did probably about 5 miles of trails, there. And one of the things we try and do, as you mentioned too, is every 100 yards or a couple hundred yards, we try and create, a visual place. You can look out over the golf course, or there's a place to sit on a pond. Just breaking up that trail. We all like to walk trails. Well, some of you like to walk more than me probably, but we try and break up areas along the trails so that people can sit, they can visit with neighbors from other neighborhoods. So, and we do see similar to what you're talking about. We'd be glad to work with you on that. A major trail, of course, being your former rail trail, and there are secondary trails, throughout the development also. Whether it's for golf cart, if it's golf cart, it's a wider trail. We used a wider trail at Bridgewater, same thing at Chatham, and it's worked very, very successfully. So we recognize there are secondary and tertiary trails and destination points. Just like I said, places to stop along the way, as well as a destination to go to the village, or to go to the driving range, or to go to different areas, parks and things like that. So you have that connectivity to it. And I think that, other than that, I think Ben answered most of those.
Steve, real quick while you're up there, I'm hearing a lot of, we know the development's coming, and a lot of us are appreciative of that, but we're hearing a lot of we are a rural community, and it's something that a lot of us embrace and that we want to continue to embrace if we can. Can you tell us how this development can help our city grow, but also embrace that rural, that agriculture history that we have? Is there a way that you envision integrating the two instead of just a hard line of ag to commercial?
Yeah, there are a number of things that we can do in that regard. Of course, the trails helps connect neighborhoods and so forth, but also just in having garden plots and having green space. You have your golf courses, green space. There are some communities doing a little bit of agritourism whereby maybe there is a certain area that is planted. It becomes educational even. So yes, I think we can certainly work with the community on that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Steve, quick question for you.
Yes.
Someone mentioned it, I think Mr. Beal mentioned it, viability of building new golf courses. You've probably built more golf courses in the last 20 years than anybody in the state. And I've heard that from other people, how many more new golf courses can we support, the client of the sport. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. But basically, we build a golf course as part of the golf course community. We build a great golf course, but we're building the golf course for the community itself. As I mentioned earlier, 60% of the people who live in a golf course community do not play golf. but they want to live in a golf course community. And so from that standpoint, and we also, there's also, someone who builds a golf course without residential is really, really tough thing. I mean, you just got to say, okay, I'm just going to do this from ego or whatever. But you have to have residential. You have to have residential around it. You'll get a premium on lots for the residential, which helps to go to pay for the course. But you have to have residential. It is all part of a lifestyle that enables you to have a club and have all the amenities in the club. But no, you look at Chatham Hills. I mean, it's off the charts in membership sales, golf membership sales. We're probably 85% full, and we're holding back memberships, for future people coming there. Zionsville, of course, I think we already have 200 families, paid families, for golf for that. So it's all about what you're building, where it is, and what it's part of, and what it's a part of. So in our situation, it's not just building a golf course, but it's a key component as part of the lifestyle community.
Thank you.
Okay.
Then one other question I had, any thoughts, that this community, as it would build out, would add significant population growth to the city? We've touched on this with school capacity, and I've had extensive conversations with the school superintendents. I know we don't have a capacity issue today, but this level of development and the growth that we're seeing in Whitestown, the growth that we're seeing in Boone County is going to change things in the next 20 years. How would you see integrating that into this development? Have you thought through that? What would you consider there?
One of the first things we did is went and talked to the school superintendent, find out what the needs are, what the growth is, what the expectations are. I think there's probably a letter in your packet from the school, very excited about the development, the quality, and what it brings. And one of the things in a community like this is you have a lot of empty nesters. And so the empty nesters are not taxing on the school system at all. And with also higher priced homes, you end up with older children or no children. And so we are not near as heavy a burden on the school system as most developments, 95% of developments would be. Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And we're ready to go to the next 2006.
Maybe just to add a little bit to that last
Okay.
discussion on services, with the sheer scale of what we're talking about here, over time, you probably are going to need another school facility. You're probably going to need another fire station. You might need a police station annex, those sorts of things. This is a very large development. Over time, and we're talking about a long period of time, it may add 50% to the population of the city of Lebanon as it is today. So we're going to need additional public services in this area. So for sure, those are things that we're going to have to consider as this develops over time. In terms of, I wanted to just go back and touch on something that both I mentioned and Steve mentioned, related to some of their product types. And I'll let him explain the product types a little better because he can do a lot better than me. Right now, in the standards that have been proposed in the ordinance for single-family detached houses with a front-load garage and what I'm calling a garage forward design, which would be your more traditional suburban home with where the garage is just as prominent or more prominent than the rest of the house, we're requiring a 60-foot minimum lot width on those homes with an overall density of 2.5 units per acre. They have some product types that would fit in the garage forward category, but they're intended and designed for smaller lots, like for empty nesters, but it's a higher scale home. So one thing that we wanted to discuss with the Plan Commission tonight is how we might be able to address that product type in this ordinance. I have to get comfortable that the architectural standards are such that a home like that on a 50-foot lot is going to be a quality home. We're not necessarily, certainly we can't legislate price points as a community, but we want to make sure the quality's there. So and I'll let him talk a little bit about some of those product types, but there may be just a question for the Plan Commission before we may do any sort of votes, if we want to amend this in some way to allow that specific product type on a smaller lot and making sure we got standards associated with that that are appropriate. So maybe I'll let Steve talk about some of those products a little bit first.
Yes, I think on our, we'll have homes of all sizes, all price ranges. One of the things that we also have in a village and that type thing, even on 50-foot lots, would be homes that have the garages that do extend forward from it. Currently what Ben is indicating is what we're talking about doing is putting in standards and conditions so that you can be assured it's not going to be a lower priced home going in that we can pull the garage forward. We have, for instance, in Chatham, we have some $900,000 homes on like a 65, 70-foot lot that have garages forward. And so it's all about where you locate those, how you locate those. And again, I'm willing to certainly to work out if you approve it, subject to us working it out with Ben as to what the standards are. There's different architectural standards, breaks in the house, 3 or 4-sided architecture, things like that we can do, adding windows to different things, so to assure that it's going to be a $225,000 or more price home. Okay. He'll walk it around and he'll come up with that. So.
That's kind of the product that he's thinking. That's essentially a 50-foot lot with the garage brought forward.
Forward.
Yep.
Okay.
So from
Okay, so that's what Ben's question is. So Ben, just so I understand your question, they're asking on the smaller lots for the garage to be forward instead of back. Is that your question?
Essentially, what we would likely do is, rather than changing the village standard, which has the garage back, we would just change the front load garage forward standard from 60 to 50. But then we look to write some additional architectural standards in there to make sure it matches the type of product they're talking about.
Okay.
So really what we'd be asking for is for you guys to make a recommendation subject to X change, and then you're relying on staff's ability to sit down with them and write the additional standards. What we may do, because it wouldn't necessarily affect their timeline, is if we make those changes, the council chooses to adopt them, if you recommend positively tonight, is we would have that come back to the Plan Commission to confirm those changes, because you won't have seen the final architectural standards. So typically, if something changes after the Plan Commission makes a recommendation, if the council adopts, it comes back. So we can do that. It won't necessarily affect their timeline, but it'll give you the ability to say, yeah, that's what we're thinking.
Okay.
Would there be any side load garages, and which design standard would that fit into?
It would probably just fit into the single-family detached, but we haven't written a separate standard for side load. That type of house design dictates a wider lot, because you have to have room for people to back out. So, so you typically at least 85-foot wide and above to try to accommodate a side load garage. So, while we haven't necessarily written a side load standard, we could probably clarify a little bit what standard it technically falls under. It probably more likely would fall under the front load garage forward standard, and we just write in there something about for side load garages.
Okay.
And again, we can bring that back post council to make sure that those are confirmed here. Yeah.
I might also add that we have an architectural review board in each of our communities, that they're required to submit their plans, landscape plans and everything, to us for approval before they can even go for a building permit. And there's many times like that we will make changes to their plans rather than a garage that might have a long brick wall or something, adding architectural components to that, windows, things like that, breaking it up. We may also certainly add landscaping. We have minimum requirements on landscaping that goes in that I'm sure are probably equal or greater than your standards. So those plans have to be submitted to the Architecture Review Board. We go through it. We make recommendations. We make changes to them, colors, things like that, everything affecting the house. And then if that's approved, they also submit a landscape deposit to us to assure compliance that they will be putting in the amount of landscaping that we are seeking, and we hold that deposit until the home is completed and they get their CO.
So for clarification, Ben, you're asking, or you're proposing that we as a council amend the front-load garage forward design to a minimum lot width of 50 feet, contingent on, or we would put our faith in the staff to create accommodations
Place some additional
or
architectural
standards?
standards to ensure, yeah.
Okay.
So there are probably two things that would have to be amended. One would be the lot width, and the other would be the side setback. So I would anticipate that they would mimic at least a little bit more the village standard, so it would be 50-foot lot width and 5-foot side yard setback. Those would be the two things that would change materially in there. And then there are other things, things like putting windows in the garage door, so it's not just a standard garage door. In some cases, depending on the product type, you might be able to require separate garage doors for each car parking space. Again, there's other things we can do to dress up. We'll look at the product type with them and see if there's other things that make sense. If it's a ranch home, maybe there's a larger requirement for masonry. I mean, there's other things we can work with them to work out to make sure we're getting the type of product that we expect.
Thank you.
It would seem to me it might make the most sense to, understanding that this is the desire of the developer, the petitioner, but knowing it's difficult to capture this in a motion and action tonight, I think it would make sense for us to consider passing it forward as is. We can make some statements here and get that into the minutes that we're asking Ben to work with them to develop a revised standard for single-family detached front-load garage-forward homes.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as Ben said, he would have between now and the council meeting to work with the developer and adopt some sort of draft standard that would then go before the council and then come back to us to be ratified, if you will. I feel like procedurally, that might be the best way forward. I don't know, Scott, if you would want to add into that, but...
I think that's probably most appropriate to do it that way, certainly make the statement. It's kind of hard to make a hard condition on that, on the recommendation to do that. We'll make the statement. The full intention here is that we have that worked out before it shows up at the council for the first meeting. So if, for example, we can't get that figured out in the next 3 days, we probably won't have this on the council meeting next Monday night. I think our intention is to try to get it worked out still this week so it can be on the council next week for the first reading of the ordinance. But I would certainly want to make sure we have whatever those standards are worked out between now and the first time it's on the council, so we're not negotiating in front of the council also.
And to, I guess, maybe put some people at ease, I mean, in our architectural standards in our UDO, we have a lengthy list, a matrix of architectural improvements. And, I think there's lots of sections in the ordinance that require them to choose up to 3 from these 12 or 16 different items that are on the list. And those could be things from, gable treatments or soffit returns or dormers in the roof. And those are things that have to be checked off, if you will, to create a score sheet to get to the minimum requirements. So this is not unheard of. We're not really treading into unheard of new territory here. So I think this is something that Ben and Ben's history and the history of the developer are more than capable to work through. So, I mean, it's obviously all this is up to this body to decide, but I guess that would be my recommendation moving forward and what I would support. Not that I'm not willing to talk about other options and consider other ways forward, but unless there's a strong objection, I feel like that's the cleanest way, but, what say you? So.
Ben, we ready to go make a motion here?
Yeah, I'd say, so what we'd be looking for, I just kind of to summarize the staff report, staff has reviewed this and finds compliance with the ODO in terms of the PUD rezone, and recommends that the Plan Commission forward the PUD rezone and ordinance to the Common Council with a favorable recommendation. So that's what we'll be looking for tonight is it's your recommendation in terms of forwarding this to the council, if you're ready to do that. So if you have any questions procedurally how that works, or if there's anything else we need to add to that, please let me know.
Chair, you looking for a motion?
I entertain a motion.
I'll motion that we submit the plan unit development rezone and ordinances presented, the Lebanon planning staff, that they found compliance with the Unified Development Ordinance, established decision criteria, and that we forward the plan unit development rezone and ordinance to the Common Council with a favorable recommendation, including the additional staff changes to the development standards.
Okay.
Let's second that.
We have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please?
Matt Reynolds?
Yes.
Kevin Krulik?
Yes.
Keith Campbell?
Yes.
Brian Tandy?
Yes.
Ashley Paddock?
Yes.
Lori Gross?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we ready for docket number 2006?
Yeah, so this is a related, as I mentioned ahead of time, we had the PUD rezone and ordinance, and then we have the second piece of this project that needs to be annexed before it can be considered for the PUD rezone and ordinance. So this involves, let's see, we don't have the computer attached again. Let me see if I can find the hard copy of my stack of papers here. Yeah. Yeah, I just
We have
gotta figure out
copies
where I got
of
it
it.
in mind, to show it on the screen. Yeah, my computer with all this stuff on it didn't work, so otherwise I would have it right in front of me.
Council, page 10.
You could put this on the Elmo there.
They've got to make sure it's on the screen. So the second piece of this is the annexation piece. And again, I'll go back procedurally. The way annexation works in the city of Lebanon, it requires the Plan Commission to provide a recommendation to the council on zoning for the annexation area before they would consider the annexation adoption. So what we looked at there again is typically if there's not a development concept, you would just establish it as the SF single-family zoning district. What I've suggested in this case.
Put that on the television, there you go.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Colors, there we go. All right, so we're talking about here, the area in green is the part we just considered for the PUD rezone and ordinance. The area in blue is the area that needs to be annexed. So again, just kind of procedurally, without a development concept, you typically just establish the SF single-family zoning district. Where there is a concept, we can consider other use districts. What I felt like in this case is the easiest thing to do would just be to recommend that SF single-family zoning classification. When we come back through to amend the PUD rezone, that's going to establish a base zoning district when they do that. You've seen the overall development concept. Most of this area is residential. A portion of it to the southwest corner is a little bit in the industrial district. Most of it is residential for the golf course community. So what I've recommended in this case for the annexation piece is that the Plan Commission recommends the SF single-family residential zoning classification to the council for the annexation, and then we'll handle when they amend their PUD ordinance, we'll handle the base zoning districts at that time. Anybody have any questions for me?
So we're talking just SF1, right?
SF.
SF2?
Just SF, yeah, it's a single,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Are there any questions on, excuse me, on docket 2006 to the public hearing? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. So I'd entertain a motion here on 20-06.
A motion that the commission recommends single-family residential zoning classification to the common council for the proposed annexed territory.
I'll second.
Okay. Call the roll, please.
Matt Reynolds?
Yes.
Kevin Krulik?
Yes.
Keith Campbell?
Yes.
Brian Tandy?
Yes.
Ashley Pettit?
Yes.
Lori Gross?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any other business coming before the board? Dan, you have any other business? Okay. Any councilman or any planning commission members have any other? Not, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, and I appreciate everyone's coming this evening and following the rules here. Thank you.